Hi guys, I'm Myra with Atomic Baby Cosplay, and today I'm going to show you how to make a scalloped hem. Alright, so first things first are the supplies you'll need. So in this case we have two pieces of fabric. This is just a basic pink flannel that'll show my stitching pretty well so you can see what I'm doing, but you can do this on any fabric. Then you're going to have a pattern piece that's a circle. In this case I traced this patch because I felt like it was the right size, and then I traced out the circle. You're going to cut it out of tracing paper and you're going to fold it in half. You also need tailor's chalk or some other marking system for your fabric that is in a contrasting color, and you also need a ruler. So I am using a clear plastic ruler. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up my fabric pretty much with the bottom edge. This is just a scrap fabric, so I'm not going to be completely precise. You should be if you're making something that is going to be part of a costume, but for practice you don't have to be as precise. So I'm going to line up, I'm going to measure out approximately an inch all the way across, and I'm going to draw a line. This is important because if you try to do your scallop right up against the edge here, you're going to have a hard time getting your scallop pressed out nicely. So I like to have a little bit in from my edge, and then I'm going to line my pattern piece up with the bottom edge of my circle, the round part, apex of my circle, on that line, and then I'm going to trace my half circle. So I just need to trace from the bottom edge that's lined up with my line to the top corner, just like that, okay? And then I'm going to line it up again, the bottom apex of my circle with the top edge of this, and I'm going to just trace it out. This does not need to be perfect because as you sew, you will kind of perfect it a little bit more. So I don't stress about it too much. If you are not a precise sewer, then you may want to spend more time getting your lines completely perfect. So I'm going to do one more just to make sure we're all set. One of the important things to note when you are doing a scalloped edge is you don't want to make your scallop too deep. If you make it too deep, where like if I were to take this all the way up here, it's very, very difficult to turn that out and have it be really crisp. So your scallops need to be shallow, but they can be wide. So they can go across this way really wide, but it's harder to have them be tall. All right, so now I'm gonna stitch this. All I'm gonna do, I'm not gonna show this in the video because it's not necessary. I'm literally just gonna stitch along my scallop, so right along this line. So I'm gonna do that really quick and I'll be right back. All right, and I'm back. So as you can see, I've stitched along my line. One of the things I wanted to note here is that you can see I made some imperfections just so you could see what happens when you have those. It's really not gonna be a big deal in the long-term process of sewing this, but I think it's really important to show what happens when you do have imperfections. So this one is pretty much perfect, so you can see what happens, and then this middle one I made two small mistakes. I didn't angle it quite as much, and then this one's pretty perfect too. So I'm going to show you what happens when you turn it and how you best turn it. So what you're going to need a pair of fabric scissors, and then I like to have thread nippers as well, and I'll show you why. So what we're going to do is we're going to follow the curve of this. We're going to trim our seam following the curve of the fabric and kind of go maybe 1/4 to 1/2 inch close to the seam. You don't want to be like right up on it necessarily, but you want to get pretty close. So you're going to clip up like this and just keep going, following around the edges of your piece. Alright, so now I've trimmed it, but you can see that I left a little bit of extra along here. Now here's what we need to do in order to make this have really crisp, sharp points. We are going to clip into our fabric, and we are going to clip very, very close to that stitch line. Right, as close as we can, pretty much. So we're going to stitch very, very close to that stitch line at that point. The closer you can get, the sharper your point's going to be, but you don't want to clip your stitching. And if this detail is going to be on a skirt hem, it doesn't really need to be that close. So that takes care of the points. All you need to do is trim away any excess fabric. So if you have excess fabric bunched up in there, then it doesn't matter how close to the stitching you got or not, it's not going to be a really nice finished point because you have a bunch of extra fabric wadded up inside your point, right? So we're going to trim away just a little bit of this extra fabric. This is where the tinier scissors really come in handy because you can get really close and in there. So then the next thing you're going to do is on the outer edges, you're going to clip some notches. These are some convex edges, and you're going to want these to be able to curve a little bit for you. if they don't curve, you'll get some bunches on your scallop in the end. And so it's best to try to clip just a little bit on the corners. So I'm going in and I'm literally just cutting out tiny little triangular notches on this fabric, just so it has a little bit of a chance to curve and bend with itself and give us a nice smooth scallop, right? And one more over here. Now that we've added some notches on the edges of our scallops and we've clipped to the points, we are ready to turn this right side out. So right now we've sewn it with wrong sides together, and then we're gonna flip it so that it has right sides out. I'm laying down my ironing mat, and I'm literally just gonna flip this right side out. So you can already see we've got a pretty nice hem that's happening here, a really nice scalloped hem. So some of the issues that you can see this little bit of bunching. That's because we didn't get quite close enough to our stitches. So what we're gonna do, you can kind of see it here on the inside, we're gonna clip just a little bit more to get really right in there. If you don't get really close to it, what can happen is you get that tight bunching, right? So we're gonna do a little bit more in here as well, because I can see just a little bit of bunching. So we're gonna get really close right up in there. And we're gonna try again and see how that looks. That's the best part about this, is that you can kind of keep fiddling with it until it gets to the point where you're happy. So you can see it, this is laying much flatter now. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna press, just to press out those last little bits of wrinkles and really give us a nice smooth edge. The more precise you are with your clipping and your pressing, the nicer the scalloped edge is gonna be. Alright, so I'm gonna flip it over because that's like the nicer polished side. You can kind of see this side's a little bit flat, so I'm gonna just push a little bit more of my fabric out so that it's nice and smooth. And there you have it. You can kind of see how, even though this one was a little bit wonky, it really doesn't look that wonky when it's finished. It looks pretty nice. You can keep fiddling with it, pull out a little bit more, really push out all the edges if you want to. You want to be careful not to use a sharp tool when you're doing this, because it can puncture straight through your fabric and that's going to make you unhappy. But basically, there you have it. That's a nice polished scalloped hem.